Round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning, like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind.
Visit StogieGeeks.com/Debonaire for a list of retailers who carry Debonaire cigars. Buy some today and get a little more Debonaire. Welcome back, everyone, to the Stogie Geeks show. I just want to give my own kind of somewhat personal update on Debonaire, Will, and for all of our listeners out there. You know, get over the holiday break. I bought a box each of that First Degree in the Debonaire line. Love that cigar. Love that size. It's just there's like you can always find time to smoke that cigar because it's short, but it smokes like a big cigar. And I'm a firm believer in that, and Debonaire is awesome. Now, I also want to say that since the Indian Motorcycle Ultra Premium has come out, dude, I'm like the crack dealer, dude. Right? I'm like, you know, like your first one's free, and I hand people. Most of what I've handed people is that Robusto in the natural, and I've handed it to 2 or 3 different people, and this was a few weeks ago or a month ago or more, and they're still to this day asking me about it. They're like, whoa, do you got more of those? Like, where do I get more of those? Like, my friend Jeff was asking, who comes on my other podcast, he's like, you got that Indian Motorcycle? I'm like, no. I'm like, I don't have any here in the studio with me, because when they're here, I smoke them all. I got some more at home, and he's like, next month you got to bring me that one. In Jim from Cigar Corner was asking me about that cigar. You know, Big Pete was asking me, but you know, he loves that cigar too. Like everyone keeps asking me about that Indian Motorcycle cigar because I've given them one or they tried one, and they're just like, I got to get more of those. So Phil's done such a great job with both blends, and the fact that I still have stories about the cigars that he made before and that he's just came out with. Is really, really telling. So Debonaire is kind of on that a little more premium end, and the Indian Motorcycle one is a little more affordable, actually a lot more affordable, but they're both spectacular. I mean, he nailed it on both ones. He ends up in our top 10 list all the time, and not because he's a sponsor, but because he makes awesome cigars. So just kind of my we haven't talked about Debonaire or Phil, and he's coming on next week. So
Yes, yeah, and I'll tell you something. He's got with Drew Estate now getting behind this. I really think it's going to be more so about Indian Motorcycle, just because I think he's going to keep Debonaire, and we could talk to him more about that. I think it's still going to be a more for select accounts because that's a more limited line. But I think your people are really good with Drew Estate behind that and what they can do. With their marketing machine, that cigar, I'm guaranteeing everyone's going to be talking about that cigar at the end of the year. That was kind of like our secret. We had those cigars on our top list, and no one else did. But we have the advantage of Phil being a sponsor. We know Phil. We followed this project from the very beginning. And this is not Phil just throwing on a band, a marketing band. This is a legit cigar. These are legit cigars. And I'll tell you, the Maduro, don't underestimate the Maduro either.
No, certainly not.
I do think that Natural Robusto is the best of the Indian branded cigars. I agree with you on that.
I tend to, but my palate, just so our listeners know, I tend to lean more towards natural, more so than Maduro. It's just the way my palate goes,
I'm natural with the Indian Motorcycle, and I'm Maduro with the regular Debonaire, but by no means is that mutually exclusive. Yes, there's some sizes of those cigars I like better than others, and that would be that's what we always talk about, but there is something with that. But yeah, I mean, they could pick up Indian Motorcycle at Mr. J's too. So I mean, I know they got a good supply of them.
Absolutely.
Yep, definitely check it out.
So Will, we're talking about what are we talking about? Touch-ups? No, we talked about touch-ups before, but now we're talking about cigars burning too hot or going out, right?
Yeah, and this was kind of an ancillary to last week.
The touch-ups, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're in a time of the year that's a terrible time to smoke, especially if you don't have a smoking lounge or a smoking room. Um, you know, I've found I've had both scenarios happen to me in the last few weeks where a cigar, a cigar is starting to burn hot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there are things you could do to mitigate those things.
And I think burning too hot this time of year, Will, I think you hit the nail on the head. I find when it's humid out, your cigar tends to go out more often.
Right.
And in this time of year, I'm looking at, so I'm a nerd, right? Like everyone that listens to the show knows that I'm a huge nerd when it comes to computers and technology, much of what Nick was saying in the previous segment.
Right.
And so I monitor temperature and humidity, not just in my humidors, but in my house as well. And I keep tabs on that because I have a home automation system and I have multiple sensors that tells me this. There's this time of year, and it's no secret. I mean, it's not science, right? Like, I monitor this, and there's a huge difference between, if you could turn down my headphones a little bit. Sorry, when I talk, it just got really, really loud in my headphones. When I look at the difference, right, and I see that the humidity in my home is anywhere between 20% and 30%, and I think about my cigars have to be in an environment that's 65%, that's a huge, huge difference. And, to just maintain that 30 to 35% or whatever it is difference is a big difference, right? When we get into spring and fall, that difference between the ambient temperature and humidity and the temperature, humidity, and humidor, there's a much closer gap. In fact, sometimes, depending on where you're in the country, maybe a pretty close match, right? It may be 65 degrees out and 65% humidity wherever you are, right? That's like your world is your humidor at that point. But here in wintertime, there's a huge difference. And what that means is, if you've got a cigar in a travel humidor, if you take a cigar with you, or even it's in your humidors are struggling to keep that humidity. When the humidity is lower, that cigar is going to have a tendency to burn hot. This is where I come full circle to our topic today, that cigars can burn hot. And it's a struggle. It's a struggle to be able to do that. Now, while we do our best to maintain the humidity and temperature in our humidors, when you smoke a cigar, you have to be cognizant of the fact that there's going to be those differences. There's going to be ways in which you can tell, like, maybe my cigar's a little dry and it might be burning a little too hot. But a prime, indicator for me, Will, that my humidity is too low in my humidor is if I take that cigar and I light it up, and when I light it up, the wrapper starts cracking, right? And I was actually telling some of the guys that work here in G-Unit Studios for Stogie Geeks and our other show, Security Weekly, that aren't like cigar geeks like we are. They've already kind of come onto the idea, and I explained to them, I'm like, this cigar's kind of cracking, or they'll actually notice I'm smoking a cigar, and they're like, hey, it looks like it's exploding. I said, a lot of that is my fault. It's not the manufacturer's fault. I'm not blaming that brand, because when you start to heat up that tobacco, it starts to expand. And if the wrapper, which is on the outside, doesn't have the proper humidity, it's going to start to crack.
Yep.
And that's when it can start burning too hot.
Yep. Now, what do you? No, that's a good assessment of that.
So, when cigars start burning too hot, there can also so that's my whole thing on like temperature and humidity and how it plays into that. Also, you have if you're smoking too fast. And I think this is some of maybe where you were going with this segment, Will, because we've been doing this a long time together. We've known each other a long time.
Yep.
I'm kind of getting in your head. You're probably also hopping on the fact that you smoke too fast.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the fast, I found smoking too fast can lead to both scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Too hot and too cold. We talked about the scenario where your cigar starts coning, right?
Yeah.
And you could touch that cone, and it's cool. And that's because the wrapper is burning faster than the inside of the cigar.
And you're smoking too fast at that. When there's a cone at the end, that's actually in, I don't know if we talked about this before, but that's in Tobacconist University. They talk about that cone that you're smoking way too fast.
Right. Right, and that's where you have to kind of make some adjustments with some of the combustion on that section to kind of bring the rest of this. It's going to require a little more TLC to do that.
Right.
To
And
keep
I don't
it.
want to toot our own horn, but when I'm reviewing cigars, I'm very cognizant of all of these factors. And
Yep.
I factor that into my review, so much so that I may not review a cigar on the show if I know it has these issues, because I take it upon myself to say, I messed up. I smoked it too fast. I didn't properly store the cigar. Whatever the case may be, I messed up. I'm going to go back and smoke that cigar again. I'm going to move it to a different humidor, let it rest for a little while. And I have like 3 different types of humidors, right? I've got the ones here in the studio that are coolers with Boveda packs. And obviously we had Charles on from Boveda, and nothing wrong with the Boveda system. I've got beads in those humidors too. I've got Spanish cedar in those humidors. But they're not temperature controlled, and they're here in the studio, which is one environment. So I take that into account. And I do my best to keep up with them at different points. In fact, I just added a ton of stuff. As winter has really kicked into high gear, I added a ton more Boveda packs. I charged all my beads. I've got the Zycar gel. Like the last week or two, like I've added a ton into those humidors because I noticed that some of my cigars were too dry, and it's helped. Now at home, I've got a temperature-controlled humidor and a non-temperature controlled humidor, and I have to maintain those slightly differently, and they're each their own environments, right? So I may take some cigars home from the studio, and I may put them in my temperature controlled humidor. Then I know is a more constant environment, and let them sit there for a week or two, and then bring them back and smoke them. So you just have to be cognizant of the environment, and the speed at which you're smoking is so critical.
Oh yeah.
And that's,
Oh yeah.
and that's both ways, dude. And I tend not to smoke too fast, because a lot of time when I'm smoking and reviewing, I'm also sitting at my desk and I'm working. I'm afforded the luxury, and a lot of my coworkers and various associates are jealous. We get on a Google Hangout or a video call, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so jealous you're smoking a cigar, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm lucky. I get to smoke in my work environment." But they can work to a disadvantage as a reviewer, because I may put my cigar down, and then I get so engrossed in my work that I'm like, oh, my cigar went out. And this is the other scenario that you're talking about, Will, is
Yep.
now I have to relight my cigar. And as we talked about last week, like that can have a negative effect on flavor. So
Yep.
you have to monitor this situation very, very closely. And I would say smoke cigars more than once, or don't review cigars. For those of the listening that do reviews, don't review a cigar if you know that, oh, I was smoking it on the day when I was really busy and I was engrossed in my work, and it kept going out.
No, exactly. And there's a lot of I get asked a lot, how come this review took a long time to come around?
Yeah, it's
Well,
because I had to
well,
smoke another one.
I had to smoke another one, or I knew that there was. You don't want to ding the cigar for an anomaly that could be part of your condition. Now, if I have a cigar 3 times and it's the combustion's bad,
Yes,
I'll note it.
right.
But that's why most of the reviews you'll see, there really isn't an issue with the combustion, and most of it's very minor, if anything. But the other one we talked about are the factors of nature, and I know I've talked a lot about wind being an enemy of smoking a cigar. If you're smoking a cigar outside when it's windy, it's going to be a problem, especially with a bigger ring gauge. You're just that airflow is going to go through that cigar,
Yeah,
and you're not going to get an ideal combustion.
It's funny, Will. I was in the. I frequently pop in next door to our sponsor, Havana Cigar Club, and I interact with a lot of different customers, and I interact with the staff there quite a bit. Because we're pretty friendly, and they're right next door. So I'm in there if I need everything from ice to I need a cigar, or I need some more. I need to buy a can of fluid or whatever, and it's just great people to work. I mean, Brenda, who you've seen on the show, she's awesome. She actually helps us review cigars. I give her cigars to review to get her feedback on them as well. She's got a great palate. And she said something that goes along with our lines of conversation. Someone said they like to smoke the Asylum in those big ring gauges. And I tell you what, I smoked the 60 ring in that Asylum. Great cigar.
I'm going to talk about one, actually. It's funny you mentioned. I'm going to talk about one in the Stogies of the Week. Yep.
So she was pointing to the 80 ring, and she was advising a customer. She's like, don't smoke this outside. She's like, you don't want to smoke this outside. She's like, it just not burn right outside. She's like, there's so much tobacco to be burned. She's like, do yourself a favor. You're going to spend the money in the cigar. Not that they're that expensive. What are they, like $10 for most of that line, right?
They're under $10. Yeah, I think they're under. Yeah, but you're right. No.
Depending on where you are in the country, right? Like, even still, you're spending your hard-earned money in the cigar. Don't go smoke it outside. It's not going to burn right.
No, it isn't.
I would even caution to smoke it in the car, too.
I took a trip in December. I took an impromptu trip to Myrtle Beach, and I met a buddy of mine down there, and I brought cigars to the beach that weren't that good because of beach, and it was actually a warm day in Myrtle Beach in December.
And the beach is like the worst environment to smoke a cigar in.
But here's what sucked is it was no wind that day, so I probably could have brought a better cigar, but I didn't want to. Not that I brought bad cigars, I didn't want to chance it with the beach at all, because the wind could just really whip to you.
Now, see, Will, you need to come up here in the summer. I don't know if we'll go this summer, but the beach that I belong to my whole life is a beach club. I have to pay to have a membership. And they have this bar that's in the place they call the Pit. So, like, they built the beach club, they built it up, and then in the lower area, it's all blocked from the wind, but it's still outside, so everyone's cool with everyone smoking cigars. Everyone smokes cigars in there. It's like the best environment ever to have a cigar because you're outside, right? But you're blocked from all the wind, but you're in that beach environment, which is great. You can have a drink and a cigar. And it's fabulous. It's fabulous. But if you're on the actual beach, like on the water, especially in New England, dude, it's windy. And that wind is just going to wreak havoc on your cigar. Talk about burning too hot or burning too hot really is the problem there, right? Because that wind is just constantly adding oxygen to your cigar, and it's going to burn too hot.
And the moisture there's going to be some moisture from the ocean that is in the air there. So it's going to. You don't want to I would not advise taking a 7-inch cigar, a Churchill, to the beach.
No.
This ain't by the way, that ain't the beach that Stogie Santa goes to, right?
No, it's not. No. I mean, because you can actually smoke on the beach because it's a private club. You can.
Right, so,
public beaches is where one of the public beaches is where he had words with the lifeguard.
But he still found a way to smoke on the beach.
Well, I think he had words with the lifeguard. He's Stogie Santa, dude. You're not gonna.
No, definitely not.
But I think the takeaways from this is proper temperature, proper humidity, and proper smoking speed, and then also the environment that you smoke your cigar in. And I'm not saying you need to be like have anxiety and worry about all of these things, but just keep it in mind when you're smoking your cigar, right? Like, enjoy your cigar wherever you are. And I've smoked cigars in like the worst environments, and I'm like, I'm gonna enjoy this cigar no matter what. And I think some of it's kind of mindset, right? To speak to like the Debonaire thing, like if you're with people that are really into cigar smoking and you're in the right environment, and to talk about Jose Blanco, like you don't want to smoke a cigar with an asshole. Like if you're with fun people that are really into the cigar smoking, dude, smoke your cigar, right? But keep it in the kind of back of your mind. The conditions you smoke your cigar in, the speed at which you smoke it is definitely going to play into this whole thing. Also, I think the wrapper types are important, Will.
Oh, yeah.
I found that, wintertime, or really any time, the darker Maduros can make it broadleaf, you're going to want to let them dry out. I find that Cameroon is not something you want to smoke in the extreme summer heat or in the extreme winter cold. I tend to hold like Christophe Cameroon's a great example of that. You want to smoke that in ideal conditions. So be cognizant of that when you choose your cigars.
Yeah, there's enough out there. And I know we've talked a lot about broadleaf in the summer just being like a sponge.
Yes.
So, just be cognizant of that. And it doesn't take a lot for that. That broadleaf sucks up that moisture very easy.
Yeah, so wintertime might be a good time to smoke your broadleaf.
Yeah, because I like I think we talked about I tend to dry box more of my broadleafs and Maduros. So.
Yep. Tobacco Especial, especially in the Negra, is one that I like to really dry box. I like that cigar to be a little drier than normal.
I would agree with you on that. I would definitely agree with you on that. Especially, I know we've smoked those box presses. I would agree. You want those a little drier. You don't want those to have any moisture on it.
Very good. Well, make sure you check out the broadleaf offerings from Debonaire Cigars, both in the Debonaire line and in the Indian Motorcycle line as well.
Yep, and we'll, like I said, for folks that know, Phil will be on next week, and we haven't had a full segment with Phil in a while, so he did on the anniversary, so it should be pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot to talk about.
Excellent. We're going to take a short break, come back with our Stogies of the week, so stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
I'm going to run out.